This is The Boys podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about Season 1, Episode 8, the finale, You Found Me.
I'm scared of you.
What?
I said I'm scared.
Of?
Of you. I'm scared of you.
Thank you. Thank you for finally being honest.
Welcome back, boys and girls, to TV Podcast Industries. It's Wednesday. It's the finale of The Boys, Season 1, Episode 8, You Found Me. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hi there, boys and girls. I am one of your other hosts, John.
And rounding out the star-spangled banners of the podcast industries, I'm Chris.
Welcome back, everyone. We've gotten to the end of Season 1 of The Boys. And all I can say is I'm ready for Season 2 right now. But that ending with a massive cliffhanger just sets you up
absolutely.
for, well, we're going to see this episode next week. But no, we're not going to see it until next year, unfortunately.
This was not what I was expecting, but I have to say I absolutely loved this episode. Dare I say it? Spoiler for my review and rating. I think this is one of the best final episodes I've seen in a while because it still had a lot going on. It's not like with the Marvel Netflix where they kind of put it in the penultimate and then it's kind of more wrap-up-y. This kind of felt like it was chugging away all to the end. And as you say, effectively it's chugging into Season 2. So the sooner Season 2 comes out, the better.
Well, thanks very much for joining us, boys and girls. That's our review of the finale of The Boys season.
That's sorry, it was a spoiler-filled one.
But thanks very much for joining us. We've got loads more to discuss about the episodes. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast over at tvpodcastindustries.com. The Boys feed will obviously be going silent until Season 2 starts coming out next year. So make sure you subscribe to the full podcast to get everything we're covering. We're still covering Pennyworth every Monday, and we'll have a bunch of new shows coming up later on in the year. Just got to plan out exactly what they're going to be, but make sure you stay subscribed over there. We also want to hear your thoughts. I know it's the last episode, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on the full season. You may not get them into the podcast, of course, but we'll absolutely respond to you. You can email us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, or you can join us over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries to discuss anything that we're talking about on any of the shows that we're covering.
Yes, fellow boys and girls, get over there and leave the feedback. It's always great to hear your thoughts. Derek, speaking of thoughts, speaking of this final episode, You Found Me. What did you find out about the writer and director for this episode?
Nothing really new. We have the writer's room and we have the showrunner for the show involved in this final episode. The episode was written by Rebecca Sonnenschein and Anne Confeld-Saunders. Anne wrote episode 5 of the show, Good for the Soul, and Rebecca wrote episode 6, The Innocents. Interestingly, because I always say this on our Marvel shows, when we have a showrunner, I always say, a true mark of the show is to have them involved in the finale, the writer of the finale. Eric Kripke is very well known as a writer. He wrote so many episodes of Supernatural. He's the showrunner for this show. He didn't write the final episode, but he did direct it. He's directing the finale. He only has about 5 directing credits in the past, so he's obviously chosen to go on to the final and guide the final episode of the show, which I just think is quite interesting to have him, normally a writer, directing the final episode, but still involved in the final episode as well. So
yeah,
cool.
Great stuff. I thought this was a really good episode, as I said, so I can't wait to get into it.
Well, John, do you want to tell them what they gave us with your synopsis for the episode?
Sure. The deal is off and the boys are on the run. The Pentagon has classified Compound V as top secret. Frenchie, Mother's Milk, Hughie Campbell, Kimiko, and Billy Butcher are thrown to the wolves, or should I say Supes, by the CIA, and the Defense Department signs up for the 7. On his first mission, Homelander recovers a sample of V from a jihadist operation in Syria, showing them all that supervillains now exist. As Butcher and Hughie attempt a final Hail Mary, they drop in on Mallory for more intel on Vought. In the meantime, the remaining boys are picked up by the feds. Discovering a possible chink to exploit between Madalyn Stillwell and Homelander, Butcher goes after Stillwell, as Hughie goes and rescues the boys with the help from Starlight, who realizes who she needs to be, an actual superhero. At Stillwell's home, Butcher takes her hostage strapped with explosives to bait Homelander, but an earlier slip of the tongue puts a different spin on the hostage situation, as Homelander knows the truth about Becca and his baby. He confirmed his suspicions by literally squeezing the truth out of Vogelbaum. To Butcher's surprise, his advantage goes as Homelander kills Stillwell by laser beam to the eyes. Homelander, however, saves Butcher from his what the hell suicide explosion moment and takes him to a home where Becca has been raising Homelander's son in secret, stunning both Butcher and Becca. Yes, this was a mic drop, dare I say it, for the final episodes of The Boys. Lots to be considered and lots for season 2 to explore here.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was a surprise not only to Billy Butcher, dare I say it, but to me. And dare I say it, a surprising turn of events for Homelander, who seems to be quite happy that he is a father here. So interesting.
Yeah, well, he's definitely a dad. He's definitely fathered a son. That's the old phrase, anyone could be a dad, never could be a father. I don't know whether I'd trust him with a puppy, let alone a child. So not sure whether Becca should be letting him in through the door to take care of the son. You know, we've seen what happened to the last person that he loved when she told him a slight white lie.
Well, that's true.
To protect him. So maybe we don't want to have him involved in the life of a child. First off, before we get into our points, well done, John. That's 8 episodes of The Boys that you've done the synopsis for. I want to say well done, because the synopses for these shows are so much more difficult than our normal ones where we talk about 5 big points going through every single point of the episode. These ones are much more, you have to give the full start, middle and end for the show. So well done. Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Ham sandwich synopsis.
Ham sandwiches. Before we all get too hungry, let's get into our moments for the episode. As we've been doing all season, we're going to talk about our boys moment, which is our protagonist. We're going to talk about our 7 moment, which is our antagonist moment. And we're going to talk about any other outstanding moment that we haven't talked about before, basically, or anything that stood out to us about the show. John, do you want to kick us off with your protagonist moment for the episode?
Yes, mine is quite a little one, really. It is cage fight or cage heart to heart. I love the fact that Frenchie and Mother's Milk are locked up together after they've been captured at the motel. They've got nowhere to go, and of course, you know, their tit for tat conversations have been a little incendiary. You know, both are trying to one up the other. Certainly Mother's Milk has been, dismissive of Frenchie's relationship with Kimiko. And, I like the fact that we have in this sort of confined environment, the two of them, just kind of understanding one another. I liked it. I thought it was a nice moment where Mother's Milk really kind of gets the female here, and Frenchie is like, oh, so you do know her name. And actually when they escape, he is the one to go after and rescue her after Frenchie has been wounded. And so, again, it's this bonding moment between the two, which I really like. And I like how Mother's Milk describes why he tried to keep his daughter and his wife separated from this, completely out of this picture. And I thought it was a nice little wrap up to here, so that Frenchie understands why didn't we know about his daughter? And it was, even though he's messed up, screwed it up really, because now they're really deeply involved in it. Mm-hmm. His intention was always to kind of keep them separate from this. I suppose in the same way that Frenchie tried to do that with Cherie to some extent, at least with him working with Billy Butcher, Mother's Milk and Hughie. He didn't involve Cherie, although I don't know where their relationship actually is now. I suspect it's purely professional, rather than something closer, even though it was kind of, my petit croissant, and things like that between the two of them. There was a little bit of, sort of love or understanding, at least,
I do want to stand up for Frenchie and say he never called anyone a petit croissant. There's a petit core, my love, my heart.
Yeah.
He says a few times, but that was about the female as well. So, Cherie is the only thing he said to her in a loving way, and she wanted him to come back, but he has now found the female. The only conversation we've really had about his type of relationships generally is that he'll kind of hook up with any woman as he goes. He doesn't really see himself as being tied down. But now in this show, it seems like towards the end of the series, we feel like he has found a partner in Kimiko. So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think another thing about this cage is just with Hughie coming to the rescue as well. Because there is that wonderful establishing shot of him going back to the motel, even though he knows just so he can get captured. And we see the SWAT team kind of rugby tackle him to the ground from afar. But then he comes in, and just Frenchie there saying, never before has a man thrown away so much for so little. Your futile gesture is magnifique. Yeah, as then Mother's Milk smacks it, gives him a right hook to get his bridge out of his mouth so that he can pick the lock. So I did like that a lot.
I have this written in my notes as the retainer to break out of the container.
One retainer to save them all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fantastic because it does really speak of like nerdy teenage Hughie getting his retainer back in his mouth to save the heroes, basically. So yeah. I really like that. And
I do like, Hughie firing the gun to give Mother's Milk cover as he goes to rescue, the female, and he's just like, I'm sorry.
That was the best. I'm sorry. Just like shouting consistently over and just spraying the bullets.
It's brilliant. I don't think he actually hits anybody. I think his covering fire is genuinely covering fire. Yeah, but I think that's definitely a mistake. He's not really looking, and it certainly doesn't have the training to do it. So
well, and
really
he comes back down and he's like, can you reload for me? I'm out of bullets. And there's Frenchie there reloading for him, and he's like, back up again. I'm sorry. I think that's what I would be like, actually.
Absolutely. Chris, I think this kind of takes it to your protagonist moment as well, does it?
It does. My kind of protagonist moment as a whole is kind of 3 parts. I'm sorry, I'm taking a bit of a
it's the final episode where 3 points means 9 points.
Yes, my part 1 of 9. It's Annie and Hughie. So just where we end up, like from the beginning of this episode to the end of this episode, how their relationship, and I don't mean in a wink wink nudge nudge type of way. I mean as in general their potential friendship or wherever this is going. So we do see Hughie go to the church, and not to get married. He goes there because he remembers that Annie says, like, she would, when she was having tough times, she'd go and listen to the choir practice. And then we get this beautiful fight scene, and a non-choreographed fight scene outside on the lawn, where it's essentially, Annie's point is, why did you think even coming to me would be this? And here he is, you're a superhero.
I was genuinely thinking, Chris, I was wondering whether the choir had started a big fight and it was cut and I didn't see it in the episode. It was like this beautiful fight scene outside the church. You mean the argument? Okay, great.
Yes. The verbal sparring, right, if you will.
Yeah.
Versus the choir battle. I would actually pay to see that.
I think they did that in Kingsman, didn't they? The big battle in a church.
And that was actually an amazing scene in Kingsman. Yeah, sorry. Anyway, back into the boys. So we do get that fantastic scene, and just enough of a scene, enough said that Hughie has planted the seeds of doubt in Annie.
Yeah.
Because next when we see her, she's at the Vought party, and she's in the new costume. She's essentially given up and just accepting of the Seven life. I don't want to get into the Queen Maeve pep talk. So the next we do see her is in the warehouse, where she basically saves Hughie, Frenchie, Mother's Milk, and the female. And that's a very cool scene. Like, it was just the flashing of the lights, the slow-mo, showing that she is pretty much a badass superhero when she wants to be.
Absolutely.
And then for me, the end is where she sacrifices herself. She stays with A-Train so that Hughie can leave.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But part of me, I like this because she sees that Hughie is still human. So this, I think, is potentially the kindling of the romance again for season 2.
Yeah, perhaps.
That he did want to just kill the person who wanted to kill him. He couldn't. So he left. He didn't want to leave. He would have sacrificed himself.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that discussion that they have outside the church particularly. I love that you do see that moment where Annie's kind of going, why would I help you? And it's not threatening. It is almost saying, give me a reason and I'll make my decision, basically. But she doesn't, as you say. She goes to this party and gets drunk and is dressed up in the uniform. She is going down that path that Queen Maeve had gone down in the past. So I really like that, Hughie does still try to convince her that he wants her to help. Her telling him that she doesn't even remember the last time she actually saved someone, and him going, well, you saved me. There was a moment when I thought my life was over, but when you went out and had a game of bowling with me, you saved my life. I think that's a lovely moment between the two of them.
I think what's good about that moment outside the church as well is that, Hughie has just had a fairly big kind of split up actually with Billy Butcher here as well, because, Billy goes, well, goodbye, Hughie. See you. It's finished, because Hughie's had this confrontation and he goes like, then what? What happens when we get Homelander and Stillwell? Is Becca going to come back from the dead? Robin too? It's just going to be more of the same, violence and bloodshed. And it's like, that's where they split. And then he, the others he wants to rescue, and the only other person he can at this moment, it's not his dad, obviously, but it's Annie. And I like the fact that, Hughie, when he says, well, Vaught's up to some evil stuff, it's your job, you're a superhero, and then that you saved me, it's coming from that place where he's effectively just cut off his link with Billy Butcher. Yeah. And also, I think the great thing is that it's that start of, as you say, Chris, even though, with Queen Maeve, this persuasion, this realization from Starlight that the reason why she wanted to be a superhero is being lost, and she gets that with her flirting with the Navy captain at the Vought corporate event celebrating this defense budget. And this is where she realizes what she wants to be is a superhero that helps people. And this is what she does. As you say, she goes in for the save, and ultimately then, as any good superhero, the sacrifice, where she stays behind. I like that, because I did think that Hughie was going to do it. I thought there was going to be that moment where Hughie rescues A-Train and maybe it would be alright, but I like that she kind of comes in and says, well, he will always come after you. Yeah. I thought that was kind of interesting little insight into A-Train, because I didn't really think that he would be like that to some extent, but he is hurting because of Popclaw. He does say ultimately, whilst he did kill her, that he still thinks it's Hughie. So he's always going to come after him. He's going to be relentless. So she stays back to save, A-Train. I presume. Or maybe his little wee hamster heart, ain't going to be able to survive until the ambulance gets there.
Well, maybe. Yeah. That's kind of another one of the cliffhangers for the episode as well. Yeah. My protagonist moment for the episode is really just the meeting of Billy and Mallory. We've seen them in flashback before, but seeing Mallory now, who seemed like a very strong character when she effectively set Billy on this path of becoming the leader of the boys in the past, she's now slightly broken, or pretty broken, I suppose. She's saying that her grandchildren were set on fire and burnt to ashes by Lamplighter, because of their last mission, effectively. And she now has just gone to birdwatching, because the choices were either be an alcoholic or go birdwatching, and she'd rather birdwatch. I do like these moments where she's not giving Billy leeway here. Billy's basically coming to her and trying to kind of cash in, as you'd see in so many of those movies. I just need you back out of retirement for one last job kind of thing. And she's going, I'm not coming back out of retirement. I'll give you some information, and whatever you do with it, you do with it, but only if you promise never ever to come back to me. So we're not looking for a season 2 where Mallory is back on the team again. This is supposed to be her saying, that's it, I'm out, as long as you take this information and get off my property, basically. So I kind of like that. The information she gives as well, I love how pointedly she puts it. She says that if you're looking for a way to take down Homelander, Madalyn Stillwell is involved with him somehow in a very weird way. He may not care for her very much, but she'll know what it is that he does care about, is the whole sentence that she puts together and gives over to Billy, So I really like that. It's not the usual thing of, in fact, actually Billy takes it the usual way. He thinks that the way to get at Homelander is to go through Madalyn, but Mallory's not convinced of that, which I think is interesting.
Well, I think it's a really nice way that she puts it. She goes, Madalyn Stillwell and her relationship with Homelander is weird and complicated. And it's like an afterthought, and it reminded me of the X-Files, actually, as she goes, hard to quantify. Right. Like that, you can't just do a simple analysis on what it is about them. So all she can say is that it's strange, and she's his account holder, but as an account holder, there's something additional here that, you know, her sources say about, but it's difficult to fully know. Is it a mother-son thing and all this? And yes, Billy Butcher, takes that there's a romantic relationship here and tries to leverage that just as that effectively breaks down. But, I thought, Mallory with Hughie and Billy was great. I loved the kind of just the bird watching element of it. But I liked the kind of, anger in Billy Butcher saying, you know, you trained me up and pointed me at Homelander, like a howitzer, and he's still that guided missile that she set off. But that doesn't faze her. She doesn't feel, it looks like she doesn't feel any remorse for doing that because ultimately her grandkids got fried by Lamplighter because of the last mission. So I like that kind of dynamic, and I like that she kind of just pointedly looks at Hughie and she goes, going after these guys, you know, is not going to end up in glory and valor and honor. It will just mean that you retire to do bird watching, if you want to do that. And it's like, you know, this is her seclusion. This is her equivalent to the laboratory that Homelander had to be in for the first half of his life. She's in this confined laboratory of bird watching for the rest of her life, after retirement. And I like how that kind of marries up. But, I thought it was a great little, moment. Really stood out to me.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the reason why I chose it as my protagonist moment, is because this is the three generations of the boys, effectively. This is Mallory, who took on Billy and turned him into a living weapon, effectively. And we have Hughie, who we've seen earlier on in the episode, has almost been turned into a living weapon by Billy. We have the old leader of the group giving the newest member of the group some advice based on all of her history. Get out of the group as fast as possible. Kind of the advice that she gives. So I really do like that. I think it's really cool. As
a whole, this scene for me just screamed the comic books, because it's very much one of the things Ennis is good at, which is that kind of deep conversations, which says so much, but happens very quickly. Just seeing Mallory, like, I'm not coming back out into this fight, hearing the alcoholism, the lamplighter, the discussions where we just given enough, which I think they'll jump into more.
Yeah, I think we'll get that as a scene. I think we'll see it on screen in season 2 at some point. Yeah.
As a whole, I completely agree with you. I think this is, just as you said, it's the old guard, the current guard and the new guard coming in.
Yeah, exactly. That's it for our protagonist moment. John, do you want to take us into our 7 antagonist moments? That makes it sound like we have 7 antagonist moments.
It does.
We have one each. John, what's your antagonist moment?
Mine is the post-coital slip of the tongue from Madalyn Stillwell. I suppose the lead up to all of this was massively creepy, and having to restrain Homelander from presumably, a deathly geezer-like ejaculation, is something, but it was just creepy, where he's like, I'm sorry, and she's like, no, this is fine, you did good, was amazingly done and creepily put on the TV. And I thought, you know, this is ultimately what Mallory is talking about, that is unquantifiable, because yes, we don't want to quantify what's going on here at all.
I certainly don't want to be crude about it, but absolutely, to kind of link into what you just said a second ago, I absolutely thought this was the moment that Madalyn Stillwell was going to die in a really gruesome scene. I'm not going to go any cruder than that. You can probably guess what I thought was going to happen.
It's like the Old Faithful exploding,
exactly,
isn't it?
Yes.
In Yellowstone Park. You kind of thought that maybe Madalyn Stillwell would actually reach heaven in a moment, after the event. But I think for me, it was that post-coital slip of the tongue. I thought that was really nicely done. You've got Homelander sort of almost like a baby, in her lap, sort of rubbing his head around her belly and all that. And it all seems very nice. But then she makes her final mistake by giving a different story to the Becca incident, than Vogelbaum, which is, she talks about her miscarrying rather than dying in childbirth and the child making it. And I think the reason why I picked this was because, again, I thought Homelander was fantastic here, where the head just turns and he says yes in that, he's just had this moment where he's saying, don't lie to me, no more secrets. And she's just messed up with her story.
Yeah.
And in answering it, Stillwell is asking, is everything okay? Are we all fine, back to normal? And he turns around, yes, just as the lie has been said. And that to me was priceless, timing, the actual shot on Homelander. And again, just simply put, fantastic. I really liked it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that slip of the tongue, which effectively drives so much of, Homelander and now Billy Butcher to the end of this episode, I thought was really nicely done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that perfectly leads me into my kind of moment, which is Stillwell's death.
Yeah.
So without getting too much into it, we obviously Butcher kidnapped Stillwell in her own home. So home napping, if you will. And the Homelander is called and brought there. And we get this fantastic scene, which is a standoff of Stillwell being in a body's vest of C4. Butcher has the dead man switch, and Homelander arrives and creepily brings down the baby.
Yeah. There's many creepy things in this scene, and I think one of the most creepy is when he's holding Teddy, the baby, in his arms and eventually puts it down and turns around to Madalyn and says, you care about that baby more than me, and expects the answer from her to be, no, I care about you more than my own child. Like, It's creepy as hell. Like that moment earlier on when he's in her lap and she's saying to him, don't worry, it's all okay, is really motherly.
Yeah.
And he seems to have had these problems all the way through the years. That's what Vogelbaum was talking about, him being the biggest failure, because if he's ever put in a situation with a motherly figure, he takes it way too far. He's killed many of them in the past, and it seems with Stillwell, the other motherly figure in his life, he's sleeping with her. So, or on occasion, I suppose. So these scenes here are totally creepy because you really don't know where it's going to go with Homelander.
Yeah. Well, let's not dwell on the super creepy, there's my good boy moment. Oh, each to their own fetish, but that's the one I never understood.
Way too far.
Yeah. Anyway, we get this. It all culminates in Homelander slightly losing his mind, admitting that he confronted Vogelbaum after Stillwell's post-coital slip of the tongue.
Yeah.
And basically tortured it out of, tortured the truth out of Vogelbaum.
Yeah.
We don't know, was it torture to death, but we can make assumptions. And now he knows the truth.
I think squeezed. Yeah, squeezed it out.
Yeah, I got the impression that he squeezed him till he screamed and then exploded.
I feel like sadly we won't see John Doman back next season, unfortunately. I have to just give a bit of credit for the behind the scenes discussion on this from Eric Kripke, where he specifically points out how good Karl Urban is in this scene, because you may not notice how good he is. He's basically sitting in the background watching these two people who are effectively the main villains of the show. They're fighting it out between the two of them, and he's hardly saying anything, just letting it all play out. That was a total choice of Karl Urban's. He asked for less and less lines in that scene, so he didn't interrupt this battle between these two characters, and I think that's really interesting.
That's an interesting choice, and it's one that works, because when it has all played out and you move back to Billy Butcher, there's a completely different dynamic there, and Homelander himself says, "So what's your play now?"
Yeah,
so it's that's a really good one.
Yeah, and before I even talk about the titular death of Stillwell. I do want to, on that note, talk about how great the cinematography was in these scenes.
Mm-hmm.
The framing of the shadow on Butcher's face. Just, it was fantastic. The background lighting on Stillwell, it was just, because it was just what it was supposed to be, like the moon light coming through.
Yeah.
Or at least just a white light. But it's just the way it was framed. It was just fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's bring it to the actual main point, which is Stillwell's death, which I did not see coming.
There you go.
The reason I say this is because literally Stillwell in the comic books is alive until at the end of the very last episode of The Boys.
Really?
Issue of The Boys. Like, he goes all the way through.
He's alive to the end.
Yeah, Stillwell is a man in the comic books.
We have never talked about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so this relationship between Homelander and Stillwell in the comic books is probably not non-existent?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
I can see why that would be very confusing.
This is all made for TV.
Right.
Yeah, God, sorry. I failed the city. I have failed this city of comic books.
Just the podcast, Chris. Just the podcast. Not the whole
No, you failed Chris's Corner.
Yeah.
The podcast within a podcast.
I'm gonna lose my. We're gonna end. I don't know what we're gonna get. John's janitorial. John. The podcast within a podcast within a podcast.
No, John's Jolly Jamboree. Thank you.
There we
That's
go.
much better.
Okay.
John's been thinking about this for weeks.
I have. Yeah. You're fired, Chris.
So sorry. Yes, Stillwell is a man in the comic books.
Okay.
There is no Homelander Stillwell relationship. That is made for TV. And Stillwell makes it to the very final issue at the very, very end of the run of The Boys.
Interesting.
Okay.
So I was shocked when this happened, especially how it happened.
Absolutely.
So I didn't see or think that Homelander would, when he was so close to her, I thought he'd just inflict some pain, because it's like that. You always see those psychos and they pluck the wings off the fly or stuff like that. You always hear about that. That's the way I kind of envisioned Homelander.
Right.
But he's so far gone on this point and feels so betrayed in his mind that she lied and that loves Teddy more than him.
Yeah.
Just burns her.
But it's the moment that he makes a choice as well. The actual lines that she says to him just beforehand is, "I'm scared." And he goes, "Of what?" And she goes, "I'm scared of you." And he says, "Well, thank you for being honest." And then burns her eye sockets out and kills her. Like, she was right to be scared, I guess, is the meaning of that moment. She was absolutely right to be scared of him. But she basically did most of the things she's done out of fear of how he would react. We heard that over and over again. And we hear multiple people saying that, well, what if he finds out that we're investigating him, says the leader of the CIA. And they go, well, he'll kill thousands of people, so let's not even investigate him for things, Let's just forget about Homelander because he's too mental and too powerful, So that's what we're kind of hearing. And we see this with Stillwell, even when she's being honest with him and finally tells him, you're scaring people around you. He kills her, He's a crazy, crazy guy.
It seems, just on that point around the CIA, like, it seems that it's known at the higher levels.
Yeah.
That he is a loose cannon.
Oh yeah.
It's like the Kardashians. Like, you kind of know that they're batshit crazy, but you just let them do what they want.
Okay.
They have the money and the power, and you're like, oh God, you're crazy. We don't even want to we're just not even going to deal with you. But yeah, you go have your reality TV show. The
TV podcast industry lawyer is telling us not to criticize the Kardashians. Okay. They have a lot of money and very good lawyers in the family, Chris.
Sorry. But you see, it's just such a strange that it is known that he is so crazy.
I think there's one of those things where they're kind of saying, if you have a foolproof way of getting him inside a prison that he can't possibly get out of, then we'll maybe pay attention to your report that this guy's crazy. Right now, we know he's crazy, but he's not killing anybody right now. So look, we'll have to just leave him doing what he's doing and hope, cross our fingers, that this guy won't go absolutely mental and destroy everything and everybody. I think even early on in the series, we had that conversation between Billy and Rayner, the CIA deputy director, where she is basically saying to him, I don't really care if he gets signed up for the army and sent off to the other side of the world because, well, it gets him out of my zone, basically. So everybody seems to have that feeling of just let him do what he's doing. Hopefully he doesn't kill too many people, basically.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, this was so tense, this scene. I was just like, what is he going to do? You know, because we saw him casually slice off a jihadist's legs at the start and then crush their head underfoot. And, you know, with that big all-American white grin, after it. And I was like, you've got the explosives around Stillwell and he whispers something into her ear. He's got this kind of menacing presence. And then, you know, she's saying she's scared of him. And I was just like, what is he going to do here? I was like, he's going to crush her skull. It's interesting actually, Chris, you saying about him, like maybe dismembering her to some extent, but still keeping her alive, like taking off a limb or something like that. What's he going to do? And then, you get the laser beams to the eyes, which that orangey red of his laser beams with the kind of lighting that they've done here was just like, whoa. And then she kind of looks like one of those Mexican death masks or something. I just thought was like, oh my goodness, this is what they've done. But I really thought it was great. I kind of felt that it made sense that Homelander would do that because, again, I think even in that moment, up until she says, I'm scared, she's still lying. She's saying, well, my actual son is less important to me than you, which is not the case. So
trying to please him.
It's just, in the end, the truth does come out that she's scared, so she'll say anything. And then also by doing this, it completely then changes the dynamic that Billy Butcher has here, because he's gone into this thinking this is his love at the moment when he knows he's been betrayed by her and she's still lying to him. So I kind of really like this. I also do like Billy Butcher's moment after that where he's kind of like,
screw it.
Oh well, screw it. What the hell? Like, detonate.
So can we quickly talk about this before I pop onto my antagonist moment? Because we don't really have anything else about this bomb going off, in the rest of our notes, I noticed. So where's Teddy?
Teddy's dead.
Yeah.
Teddy's
dead.
crispy.
Yeah.
He's crispy like his mommy. Like, it's like that's the only way. Like, Homelander hated the kid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't think Homelander was going to save the kid.
Just thought, I'm gonna die anyway. I might as well take out as much of Homelander as possible. Screw the collateral damage.
Right.
Like, in my head, that's it. And
it's interesting because it's just one of those things where there's no mention of it afterwards. Obviously, we only get a very short scene, which we're going to talk about in a mo. But it's just one of those ones where afterwards you think back and you go, well, that bomb accomplished absolutely nothing except destroying any evidence that Madalyn Stillwell was killed by Homelander and killing her son, effectively.
Yeah, it would be blamed on a gas leak.
It'll be blamed on Billy, basically, that he killed Madalyn Stillwell and her son in a bomb in their house. And that's kind of it. And Homelander gets off scot-free. So, interesting. Just wanted to point it out just there because that's the only time we really have the bomb mentioned.
Unless they do in season 2, because of, it's just assumed that killing a child is probably bad in this case for a TV show. They probably weren't sure when they wrote this and filmed this that they were going to get a season 2. And you can assume that they were like, well, let's just say nothing. And if we get back for a season 2, we can say, and Teddy was found, he'd been given Compound V as a kid, as a baby, and he's indestructible. And he was like there.
Okay, let's cross our fingers for that for season 2. My antagonist moment from the episode, we already kind of mentioned earlier on, is it's A-Train's heart attack. Because I just think it's a really interesting way that they've they've ended every character story in this final episode. It's very hard to do when you have the seven and when you have all the boys, to give everybody a moment effectively. But having A-Train stand up for his beliefs effectively, why should a member of the seven be helping the boys? And why should they be helping Hughie, especially because Hughie did what he did to A-Train? And I thought it was an interesting conversation between the two of them, especially because, we had that discussion back when he was talking to Popclaw, telling her that he was absolutely in love with her. There's nothing else that we've seen on screen that says that he was lying at that time. And he actually has that moment after Popclaw's gone. He's telling Hughie, you killed the woman I love. I know it was my fault. I know I actually killed her myself with my own hands, but it was your fault that I had to kill the woman I love. So he absolutely did love Popclaw. He was absolutely in a relationship with her, but he knows to protect the seven, he did have to kill her. I think that's kind of where we get to. So it's good to have that kind of laid out in this final episode, but also to have the consequences of him being a V addict coming back to stop him at this final moment where he could have actually gotten to Starlight and could have gotten and killed Hughie effectively. It's all because he's been using this V to mend his bones overnight to keep himself as the fastest man alive, which he continually says throughout this episode. I think he says it 3 times in this episode, I'm the fastest man alive, and you see a poster up in the background saying fastest man alive as well. And at the end of the episode, it's possible that he may be the fastest man dead. Which I just think is quite interesting. But yeah, no, I'm glad they ended off his story in this final episode, because you could have left it and gone, we'll come back to that in season 2, and just had him, in the shop on crutches. But the fact that he mends himself, pulls a train behind him, and has a moment with Hughie in this final episode is really good. I liked it.
I'm interested to see where they will they save him.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the end of this season, is he going to be has his heart stopped completely? And will that body count on top of that of the translucent be added to the boys' ledger? Maybe. It's going to be interesting to see that, I think.
Yeah, but at least we had that moment where Hughie checked the pulse and Annie calls the ambulance to come and pick him up. So at least we have those moments where we think, as of right now, he's not dead. So she stays with him to wait for the emergency services to arrive, and cross fingers they get there quickly, basically. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in season 2. But that was just my quick antagonist moment for the episode. John, any other outstanding moments we haven't talked about?
For me, I just like the brief moment with the Deep, actually.
Oh yes.
He's in Sandusky still. And I like the fact that, the opening where Homelander goes into Tal Rifat in Syria, gets the Compound V, effectively sets up, the multi-million-dollar Vought international contract with the Defense Department. And also we do get that little moment where he says, he was the one that started the Supes terrorists, in that sense, not as such Vought, it was Homelander, which is a really nice thing. But, the seven are being called in. It's like the battalion being called to arms. And the Deep believes that he is back and he will be leaving Sandusky. He's been called up. He's making himself a vodka smoothie, whilst the guy who's kind of his babysitter is like saying, well, we've been on to New York, and well, you're going to be the savior of Sandusky. And it's in that moment where he suddenly knows his place. He is no longer this cocky guy that we saw at the start. And I think that's one of the really outstanding aspects, I think, of this episode is where the Deep was in season 1. And because it was surrounded with him showing off his midriff to Annie, and Translucent was a bit, of a creep as well. You just kind of thought, okay, this is all the seven. But he has just been gradually put on the longer lead by Vought, by Madalyn, by the seven. And he's now left adrift, in Sandusky, with only opening up of the aquatic park, the thing that he can do. And I like that he kind of goes off, the deep end here and does his whole shaving moment. I still think it's kind of creepy seeing his gills flap a little in the mirror. I mean, it's good CGI that level of detail, but then he does that kind of swimmer thing where he shaves, his chest, and
legs and
arms in order to sort of make himself streamline. And unfortunately the flipper Brigade isn't going to be his moment. He is going down the Britney Spears moment of shaving his head.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
he feels disgraced. He's lost it. He's no longer a part of this star-studded seven, effectively. And I thought that was a great degradation of this character from the start to the end, where he's basically shaving himself in the mirror on his own in some Hickville in Ohio. Apologies, anyone listening from Sandusky, Ohio.
Well, Eric Kripke, the showrunner for the show, is from Ohio, and that's why he set it in Sandusky, because he knows absolutely nothing goes on there. This is the story, really, of a superstar who's able to get away with anything, getting paid millions and millions of quid, and then their life takes a turn and they fall out of favor with everybody. So that's what we've seen with The Deep. Probably thinking back on the first episode, you kind of think that he's pushing his luck with the new starter in the group because he can get away with anything. He's this person. He's one of the only massively famous superheroes in the world, one of the seven effectively, and thinks he can do whatever he wants to. So he pushes his luck at the start. You hear, even from the start, you hear him going, well, I can end your career to Starlight, and you find out pretty quickly, actually, he's always been criticized by everybody around. He's always been the butt of everybody's jokes. So he's always been a sideline person, but he's trying to push an advantage he thinks he has on Starlight, and look what's happened to him. He's lost his career. He's lost all of his money. He now's on, 95 quid per DM is what he's on now. Whereas in the past, 75, not even 95, not even almost $100, 75 quid a day. And in the past, he used to live in like penthouse apartment in Vought Industries building, Now he's living in this little crap hole one bedsit, basically, where his only friend is the PR guy, and he doesn't even tell him the truth most of the time. So, he absolutely fall from grace and drop from massive superstardom to just being the person that cuts the ribbon, or maybe has his own Las Vegas show. To continue that Britney Spears, analogy there, I suppose. But yeah, definitely a sad end for the character, but well deserved from where he tried to push things at the beginning of the series.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think they're going to give him a redemption arc in season 2?
I don't know how you do it. I think this moment of realization that he has here in this episode is the first moment where he's gone, I did this to myself, is what this feels like. So I suppose that's where you start. If people can't come back from things they've done wrong, well, what's the point in any of us living, I suppose, if you can't come back from what you've done wrong. But, I don't know whether redemption arc is the thing. He'll certainly have to work massively hard, particularly as we saw in that last episode when he did the apology, to camera. He was putting it on. He still wasn't agreeing that he should be apologizing. He was just doing what he was told by the company. So this is the first moment of hopefully many that he would need to go through to build himself back up to the ability to be even able to get back into the seven,
Well, actually, I don't think it's about even getting back. Like, I have a theory that they may turn him into, basically his redemption arc may make him similar to, similar to Annie. To Starlight, in that he wants to be a superhero again, so he'll start from fresh. So it could be an interesting one. And I actually would like to see that scene where him properly, actively, actually, truthfully apologizing to Annie.
Yeah, absolutely. That would certainly make it much better than the fake apology that he did on television, I suppose. But I do wonder, remember he did say that he was never happy in the seven either, because everybody criticized him all the time, and the only jobs they gave him where there's a fish in a river that needs to be saved, that's a job for the deep. There's some guys that are adjacent to water, so we need to bring the deep in to save them. So remember, he wasn't massively happy with being a superhero. He did seem to try and take advantage of the fame side of it, but wasn't massively happy with it.
Absolutely. And that apology, though, was at the insistence of Stillwell to get ahead of the narrative. So it wasn't even his, and maybe he thought he still had the chance and protection of Vought, which he then, and certainly now, knows that he hasn't gotten. He knows that he's being effectively cut adrift. So, that puts the different perspective. I mean, for me, certainly, I really hope that we see the Deep in the second season.
Oh, absolutely.
I really hope we have him there,
Trace Crawford is fantastic.
Yeah, with whatever arc he does, redemptive or otherwise, I think could be just really good. I think his story is not finished. So I really hope he's back in season 2.
Definitely. He's such a great actor, without a doubt. That's it for Deep Shaves?
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention Queen Maeve. I haven't got too many massive points because I think you guys are talking about a lot of the massive points and we're kind of talking about them all together, really. You mentioned it earlier on, the moment where she finally gives some advice back to Annie, in this episode. I think I've mentioned it actually in almost every episode that there must be some connection between the two of these characters as to what they've gone through in the past. But I absolutely love the explanation from Queen Maeve that the item that was leveled at her specifically from Annie, that I wanted to be like you because you once saved a bus and you broke all the bones in your arm, but that was probably written by the PR guys. And we find out here that actually that was the thing that Queen Maeve did that saved a school full of kids. And to hear that one of her biggest fans now believes that that's something she didn't do and it's all just made up by the PR guys hurt her so badly because she used to be just like Annie. She used to be a superhero and believed that she was a superhero and that's why she wanted to be in the Seven, but she let everybody walk all over her for so many years that now most of her is lost. So she effectively says to Annie, you just go ahead and be your stupid, annoying self because one of us has to do it and you're the only one in the position to do it. So I kind of like that kind of handing over the mantle from Maeve. She's not specifically saying she's going to be any better in the future, but she's saying to Annie, you be better now because you can be. And I've gone way past that point effectively. So I kind of like it. I really like that relationship.
Yeah. I love the parallel storyline, here, you know, and I think it's just testament to the writing. I think, when Queen Maeve goes, I started giving pieces of myself away. I guess I gave away everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's a really interesting sentiment that, you know, I think Starlight is barfing down the toilet and she's like, do you want me to hold your hair? You know, Queen Maeve can see that she has given that first piece, to Vought, and she'll have to give more and more and more, as she gives ground to maybe her principles, her point of view, and that for Queen Maeve, it happened over time and all of a sudden she has this moment, that, well, I gave everything away. She can't remember when that time came, but certainly it happened. So I liked, how this was done, for sure. It was a nice moment between the two ladies.
Yeah.
I love this. The just showing that her radial fracture in her arm never healed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what was going on. When she was pulling her for brace up, I was like, is she about to say that she cuts herself? Are we going to go down that route?
Right.
Is that she self-harms? And then it didn't go down that route.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I really enjoy this. And I think you're right, Derek. I think she may be the one who will stand up to Homelander at some point.
Yeah.
That this is happening slowly but surely. It's building towards that she sees the problems.
Exactly. Like, this is absolutely what I thought was happening in this episode. I thought it was going to be punchy. Queen Maeve jumps over to the other side. After that discussion with Hughie, Starlight gets her on board, and then the two of them go and track down Homelander. Starlight blinds Homelander, and Queen Maeve punches him to death, or punches him into oblivion, effectively. But that didn't happen. That's not how the episode ended. Chris, do you want to take us on to your final outstanding moment?
Yeah, sure. This is the big one. This is the one we've kind of been dancing around a bit. It's the very last scene in this episode, the very last scene in this season. It's Becca is alive.
Yeah, she is.
And the sun is alive, and the sun is a soup. We see his eyes light up the same way with Homelander's heat vision, if you will.
Yeah, not just because he's seeing Homelander with actual superpowers.
That was kind of cute, I thought, actually. Daddy.
This completely uncharted territory for me. Because, and I will say this just to get it out of the way now, Becca, whatever way you want to call her, she's dead as a dodo in the comics.
Okay. Right.
And I've gone all the way through them.
Yeah.
There's never a hint of this, so this is completely uncharted territory.
Excellent.
This is a nice... I was not expecting this. Mm-hmm. If anything, I was expecting Teddy to be the child.
Yeah.
Me too.
For a second.
Yeah, and I actually said that just beforehand. I was going, oh, what if Teddy is Homelander's son? And then I just went, hang on a second, but didn't Becca disappear 8 years ago?
Yeah.
So of course her son's going to be older than Teddy. And then I was going, oh, maybe they're just going to say that Madalyn Stillwell had Homelander's child and that's who Teddy is. And that's how they survived the explosion. That's how Teddy survives the explosion effectively. But he seems to have absolutely no care for the child at all. So, that didn't make sense either. But yeah, a really interesting decision here.
No, and so first of all, seeing Butcher's face, but then seeing Becca's face.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, so I'm wondering, is she the chameleon character, the doppelganger character that we see, the big old man that was having coitus with the senator at the beginning of the season?
That never even crossed my mind.
Maybe.
So that is part of me going, okay, so maybe like it's not. So the kid survived, but not Becca, and this is just like the doppelganger's job is to stay as and look like the Becca. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't look. Okay, I just. So how did she survive?
So I think the decision that she was making the 3 hours that she was sitting in the park, I think I said it on the episode actually, was that she was being told you have to go into hiding with Vought International to save this child. It's probably going to be a super child effectively, because remember we saw that scene where the red light was coming out of her stomach. Billy never knew she was pregnant at all, of course, with Homelander's child, but I think she was taken in at that point by Vought. The child was born and she was making that decision in the park that she had to leave Billy and everything she knew behind in order to take care of this child effectively. That's what I think happened. And I also think, and I was going to mention this earlier on, but I mention it now, I also think that by the explosion in the house that Billy's done, I think the reason why Homelander's taken him to Becca is effectively to say, you now take responsibility for killing Stillwell and possibly her child Teddy. If you take responsibility for that, I won't kill your wife, who you've just found out is alive. And Homelander gets away scot-free for it and is able to walk back into Vought, back into his position.
That's true.
That could be.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of very Machiavellian and Homelander-like. I mean, certainly I think...
I'm learning a lot from him this season.
I think certainly the fact that Vogelbaum and Stillwell didn't get their stories straight, well then it's interesting that they would put the doppelganger into the house and make that super look like Becca.
But you're thinking it's Homelander that put the doppelganger into the house.
Okay, right.
Potentially.
Yeah, okay.
I just wonder if I'm wondering why would Homelander even bring Billy Butcher there if he just didn't, why would he just kill him? Why wouldn't he just kill him? You know,
he's
taunt him and then kill him.
Well,
but I'm thinking he's going, right, I have something on you now. I have your wife alive. I know how much you care for her, and I will kill her unless you take the fall for this and get off my back, and then I'll go back into the office. Remember, everything throughout this episode, we saw Madalyn Stillwell was about to get promoted to the 82nd floor. She was going to be up there with all the management team, and she's being told that in the future we're looking to put somebody in charge of Vought, and you're the most likely candidate. She's gone now. The only other person that knew all of her plans was Homelander. So is Homelander trying to put himself into a position in Vought to be the leader of the company in the future? Don't know whether anybody would want a Supes being the leader of the company. They seem to know that they need leashes, many times. But I think this might be his plan to get back into Vought and try and cover up all the things that he's effectively done. He's pretty good at that. Yeah.
It's just, it's such a departure.
Yeah.
Because in the comic books, she was raped by Homelander.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this wasn't, so far we've not had that. It looks potentially, it's questionable.
Can I say that she's absolutely been raped by Homelander in this show? Because the only person that says that she wasn't is Homelander.
Yeah.
He says she wasn't. She liked it. She loved it. She came 3 times. He says she was amazing in bed. But that sounds like Homelander. That sounds like the kind of thing Homelander would say, particularly to taunt Billy.
Yeah, he goes like, she came on to me. The fame gives people different crushes, that kind of thing.
But we saw her coming out of the office on that CCTV footage that Mallory showed to Billy, showing her completely disheveled, so showing that she obviously had gone through a massively traumatic experience. So you've got to think that Homelander pushed himself on her and kept her in that room for 3 hours, So I think that's the unreliable narrator of Homelander. And he's also trying to get at Billy to say, oh, your wife wanted me.
Yes, part of me believes all that. The dishevelment is definitely that, because she looks a bit shocked. But
Massively,
from this scene, we see that Homelander is somewhat of a flash in the pan type in person.
Yeah.
He can't last that long. So 3 hours. So I'm curious. I just, there's so many questions from this, and this definitely. Is for me. This is the where things get interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because exactly that, it's uncharted territory, not just for the comic books, for the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's basically you're going into season 2, and they have years of history to draw upon, but now it's moving into a space where they're like, okay, we planted we were very faithful to a degree to the comic books. Okay, now we're verging. Now we're launching our own ship towards the new world.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the PR behind all of these shows and the showrunners behind all of these superhero shows always say, and movies based on books and all that kind of stuff, the line they always use is, we want fans to watch it, we want fans to enjoy it, but we don't want them to feel like we're just making a direct translation of their properties into shows. What I've noticed over the last couple of episodes, Chris, and thanks very much for your Chris's Corner, I know you have another little bit coming up, but what I've noticed over the course of all of these episodes is there are bits taken from issue 1, and there's bits taken from issue 80 of the comic books, or issue 60 of the comic books, all the way through the run of the comic books, and it left me kind of going, are they going to take anything else from the comic books now that they've set up the characters this way? There's probably a few missions here and there that they can take, but they've taken quite major points from all across the series of the comic books. They've now created their characters. It can now roll off in any direction they want it to. They don't need to necessarily stick to the books. They've done enough to pay homage to the books now, I think, that they can move on and say, right, these are our characters now, and we can take them off in whatever direction we want them to go. So, I think that's quite interesting. Killing off major characters at the end of the season and bringing characters back to life at the end of the season are two major choices that they're making here to go, this is now our story that we're going to tell.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think this moment where Becca comes out, I do think, I still think it's now a little unclear with the TV show whether she's raped or not.
Okay.
Because at the same time, we do know that Mallory has used that footage to point, Billy Butcher at Homelander, like a howitzer. And I think whilst everyone realizes that Homelander is dark, on the edge, borderline psychotic, and needs to be handled with care, he does say that, and I agree. I think that idea of the flattery about that she came for me 3 times, it was kind of a girl crush, this stuff happens. I think that's him, sort of bigging it up. Mm-hmm. But he says, you think I'm responsible for her death. Because he's been lied to.
Yeah.
So he hasn't killed her. Yeah. And maybe there was something genuine there. Maybe this was the mother figure that he, really hit on. That's why he could last maybe 3 hours in the room with her. Maybe there's something that this is the first person, the genuine person that he had some kind of feeling towards as a female, as a woman. And then he's been lied to. So as far as he's concerned, she has gone, died, missing, fired, you name it. So I think there's definitely a lot to explore here.
Oh, yeah. This is like taking a post-credit scene in one of these movies and stretching it into an entire podcast and talking about the possibilities that could be coming from it. There's that look between the two of them, between Billy and Becca. Obviously, Becca never expected that Billy would find out that she's alive. But we also find out here that Homelander's never seen his son before. So it's not like he pops over on a Saturday to this house. Becca's probably just as shocked to see Homelander there as she is seeing Billy Butcher's there, it would seem. Cause we hear earlier on in the season, you hear Homelander talking to Madalyn Stillwell, saying to her, do you remember that intern that we had? Do you remember that PR woman that we had that did the social media for a while? What happened to her? So he doesn't know about her living here. I presume he squeezed all of this truth out from Vogelbaum, and he wants Billy Butcher to have the same reaction to her being alive that he does, kind of thing. So,
Exactly.
So it is massively intriguing, wonderful end to an episode to have it as much of a cliffhanger for the show as this one. So,
Definitely.
Yeah, really,
really good stuff.
Yeah.
It just leaves us in places where they can take it left, right, up, down, anywhere, and it's very much okay. They're planting their flag now.
Absolutely.
I know I've said that twice, but that's really how I feel.
Absolutely. Any notes for the episode, guys?
Yeah, one from me. I think, as you said, each one of the Supes kind of gets their moment, and dare I say it, so even does Black Noir, who has a little weird moment with the piano piece where he just plunks himself down next to the pianist, who carries on and then realizes there's a little bit of a threat developing on his left hand's shoulder, and kind of goes, oh, well, okay, well, I'm going to go now. As then Black Noir goes into a lovely piece of Chopin, very weird. Don't quite know why it was there, but nonetheless, Black Noir even does get a little sign off for the season in Black Noir type fashion. He has been there, on the periphery, and he kind of stays there as he does the background music for the Vought, corporate celebration.
It's so creepy. It's so intimidating as he just sits there beside him and kind of just wards him off by staring at him. I do love it. I think it's really interesting. I wonder if we're going to see any more next season, if we're going to find out anything about the character at all next season. I think we mentioned before he's based on Snake Eyes from G.I. Joe rather than a DC character, a character that's notoriously silent and doesn't ever speak in the comic books or in the TV show. He's just a very violent ninja, effectively, which is kind of what you'd expect from Black Noir. Hopefully we'll see him in the future. And sadly, because I'm weird, it's only in the last episode of the season saying his name out loud that I went, oh, his name's Black Noir, the darkest of the dark. Just, you couldn't get a more sinister name than Dark, Love it.
Wow. That's taking you a while.
It has. There's a lot been going on in the show.
One note from me is the reveal of Mr. Edgar. Played by none other than Giancarlo Esposito.
Yes.
Gus from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. For me, he will always be Jack from The Usual Suspects.
Yes.
I'm so weird. I've never watched more than 5 episodes of Breaking Bad, and I'd never watched Better Call Saul because I know that's a prequel to Breaking Bad or a sequel to Breaking Bad. So I don't think I ever got to an episode that had Giancarlo Esposito in it, unfortunately.
Well, don't worry, because he will be in The Mandalorian, and he is also in Stargirl.
Oh, well, definitely. We will see him.
So we'll be definitely seeing him again. And based on who he's playing in the show, Mr. Edgar from the 82nd floor, it's definitely going to be just really good because he's going to be back. So we will see him in season 2.
Just one of the special guest star in this episode I really liked at the beginning of the episode. We saw Jim Beaver, who is known to Supernatural fans, Eric Kripke's former show, as we mentioned multiple times. Jim Beaver, I think he's been in almost every season of the show, even though I think he died quite early on. He's Uncle Bobby on Supernatural, but he appears quite regularly in many, many episodes and many, many shows, on Supernatural particularly, but he's had loads and loads of other shows as well. But great to see him being brought on board for the start of this episode.
Absolutely. It's always good to see the Beaver pop up, and it was great to see him here. In fact, that was a nice kind of reveal as well, where you think you're in the Department of Defense and Madalyn Stillwell having to explain herself, and then it pans back and they're actually in the Vought building on the table that the 7 sit, where she says, you've got no choice. All the other military defense contractors are now obsolete.
Exactly.
I'm the only one with the product that can fill your need. Really good stuff.
Yep.
Like that.
Didn't save her life, unfortunately. Chris, do you want to go on to our Chris's Corner for the final episode of season 1 of The Boys?
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Welcome to Chris's Corner. So, if any of you ever seen the MTV movie hit cultural phenomenon that was Joe's Apartment with the stinging cockroaches, now you can have the kind of theme song in your head for Chris's Corner.
The minute you said MTV movie hit, the only thing that went into my head was Joe's Apartment, and I was hoping there was another movie, but there hasn't been, has there? That's the only one.
Nope. Not at all. Joe's Apartment is the cultural phenomenon about singing cockroaches, and anyway, this is not Chris's MTV corner. This is Chris's corner, where we talk about some of the lesser known aspects of the boys and the source material. I've been keep saying for a lot of it that I've been going to talk about it in the last episodes, depending on what happens. So I'm going to bring in some of those bits. The first is Vought actually manufacturing supervillains. Yeah, that's 100% from the comic books. Truth be told, they manufacture the supervillains and the superheroes in the comics.
I thought it was massively shocking in the episode to find out that it was Homelander on his own manufacturing the supervillains. In here, it felt like it was going that way, like the comic books. I thought it was going there, that they were, setting up supervillains to sell the superheroes. I think we mentioned it earlier on when we found Kimiko for the first time, that we thought they were doing this on purpose, so they would always have supervillains to fight against their superheroes and keep them all in jobs. But turns out a plan of Homelander. Maybe the ones that happened in America were done by Vought International, but the ones that were done around the world were done by Homelander. Maybe that's where he got the idea from, but we'll only find that out in season 2, I suppose.
Yeah, it's really, but I'm interested to see where they go with that now, because they need supervillains. One piece, just bringing it back on for Compound V. So I've been tiptoeing around this. In the comic books, the boys do take Compound V.
Yeah.
Which gives them the edge, which it gives them the power to actually go toe-to-toe with some of the superheroes.
Delighted they chose not to use that one, actually. Yeah.
I am and I'm not. I do want to see like a Billy Butcher versus Homelander go toe-to-toe for a while as the Compound V fades out of the system. Because Vogelbaum, the whole reason that it is true. So Compound V causes a lot of problems in people. It doesn't always create superheroes. So the reason and the way the boys are able to do it is essentially Vogelbaum refines his process on Compound V and gets one that does work in adults. Because in the TV show, we hear Homelander say it was a messy affair trying to get it to work in adults. And he's not just talking about the female and her body count.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's talking about like it kills more than it saves, or kind of empowers. So yeah, there's definitely space to go into that. Like I know we're diametrically opposed on part of this, in that you don't want them to get V'd up, but I do want to see part of that, because it's not always permanent.
Yeah, no, I just feel in the show, the hatred that they've explored with Billy Butcher for anybody using V at all, even Kimiko, he says she's not even part of the team. He keeps calling them the boys. He feels that she's not part of the team at all, even at this point. So the idea of him taking V just to go into a battle, it just wouldn't sit well with the actual show, the way they've laid it out. But that's just a choice of the TV show. They could absolutely change that in season 2. But particularly, again, as they've set up that taking it as adults could kill someone, what are you going to have? 5 of the boys take it, 4 of them live, and 1 actually gets superpowers?
Unless Vogelbaum has some in his place.
Maybe.
And as long as he's not, or maybe he is dead, maybe he's not dead, we need to find out.
I think he's squished.
Speaking of squished, let's talk about Mallory and her grandkids. Essentially, this is, we've heard about Lamplighter quite a bit. Well, not quite a bit. We've heard about Lamplighter, which was the analogy of Green Lantern in the 7. He was basically had the power of flight and had a big glowy lamplight, essentially. A lantern. And he, when the boys first kind of went after the 7 before it all came to ground in the comic books, essentially they drew a truce. But Lamplighter wasn't happy with that because they had ruined part of his career. So he followed Mallory back to his, I should say, so because Mallory is a man in the comic books, his hotel where his daughter and grandkids were staying. And then when Mallory and his daughter went out, Lamplighter went in and killed the grandkids and posed them in a jacuzzi in a very horrific way. So this is the kind of the piece that drives Mallory to leave the boys, because it's just the body count is getting too high. The impact is getting too high. And we hear that something similar happened in this. So Lamplighter is killed in the comic books by Mallory for this and because of this. So I'm wondering, will we see a cameo of the Lamplighter and see Mallory killing the Lamplighter in season 2?
Maybe, yeah. It does feel like one of those weird ones, doesn't it, where they've talked about a character for the whole of the season and all we've seen is a poster, I think, of Lamplighter early on in the season.
He's also in the fresco at the back.
Yeah.
You know, that relief.
Oh, that's the other photograph from season 2 that's been released, isn't it? Where we have Starlight has been added to that fresco above the room, but we didn't see that during this season. It's part of season 2's setup. So that's cool. Yeah.
And then speaking of Annie, thank you very much.
No problem.
Her origin story here is pretty different from the comics.
Right.
So in the comics, I should say in the series, we find that her mum gave her in to be V'd up, and that her dad left because of that.
Yeah.
But the mum continued on and put her through. Let's say the Vought, what was it, the pageants, etc. In the comic books, it's pretty different because basically for whatever reason, her mum and dad are exposed to V, and Annie is born with blinding powers at birth.
Right.
So as soon as she exits the womb, she blinds everyone in the room, including her parents.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
And because of this power, essentially Vought adopt her and give her to foster parents. And her birth parents just sign off, are given a big chunk of change and sign off anything to do with her.
Right.
And this foster family, you find out there's this network of foster families who raise Supe kids and put them in the pageants, and the pageants are just basically training them for the 7.
Right.
It's that type of way.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. It's cool. I think there's probably been a few stories earlier on, as we talked about throughout the season. There's a few stories of Supes not having parents, so it's kind of interesting that we have that relationship between Annie and her birth mother, effectively, and that no money changed hands. That's quite an interesting idea. It's kind of like the pageant system in America, where you're kind of going, does a 4-year-old really know that they're being put through this pageant system by their parents for the betterment of themselves, or is it just the parents trying to live their dreams through their kids, which is what comes out in this episode? I thought that was quite a cool choice. But that's really interesting in the comic books. That does seem much more like a comic book origin story for the character.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to quickly jump into season 2. So there has been implications, and it's been confirmed that the character of Stormfront will be in season 2. And this is really interesting for 2 reasons. One, they're making Stormfront a female, which is not that problem. We've seen this gender swap in this season a lot. But more, Stormfront's a Nazi.
Right.
Stormfront was literally one of the original Compound V test subjects from Germany in the comic books, and is brought over and is a full-on Nazi.
Right.
But he is he's basically essentially Homelander, few more different powers like control of lightning and things like that.
Okay.
But he hides all his Nazi crazy rhetoric internally, but is essentially that.
So he's like Red Skull from Marvel, right?
Yeah, but
like
with a better looking face and a mustache.
Yeah. Okay.
But the reason I bring this up is this implies the addition of another team. So in the comic book, Stormfront is part of Payback. And if you think of the 7 as being the boys' version of the Justice League, Payback is the boys' version of the Avengers.
Okay. Yep.
So you've got Stormfront being Thor. We've also had a couple of other named characters in this. So you have Tech Knight, who we talked about, which is basically the Batman Iron Man. We have Soldier Boy, who's Captain America. You have Swatto, who's the Wasp.
Love that one.
Mindroid, who I talked about before as well, who's the Vision.
Yeah.
Crimson Countess, which is Scarlet Witch. And Eagle the Archer, which is Hawkeye.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the fact that they have named Tech Knight, I think they've named Stormfront, and I think we got Mindroid, or maybe I just brought Mindroid up.
I think you mentioned Mindroid in relation to Mesmer, the character that could read people's minds earlier on the season.
That was it, yes. So look, it's just interesting to see, because we've had our Justice League, now are we going to get our Avengers?
Maybe.
And how they'll bring that in. Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really.
So
looking
this
forward
has
to
been everything for Chris's Corner on season 1 of The Boys. If you would like to know more in season 2, just leave us a nice note, and I will get back to it next year when The Boys is released.
Excellent. Thanks very much for Chris's Corner, Chris. Chris's Corner season 2 coming soon, or maybe John's Jolly Jamboree if he's read all the comic books by the end of next year.
Well, yes, it might be where we just descend into filth and the darker side of the boys.
Now, hang on. I don't know whether you could call it Jolly Jamboree if it's going to be the darker side of The Boys, John.
Well, no, that's true. Or maybe we take a hard analytical look at the Mr. Men series.
I don't think that would have any connection at all to The Boys. But anyway, let's get on to general thoughts about The Boys. John, do you want to give a rating for the season 1 finale or the show itself?
Oh, I do. I give this 5 rapey Santas out of 5. Yes, in the immortal words of Billy Butcher to Homelander.
Stop being a rapey Santa and get down off the roof. Yeah, I love that line.
Yes. Yeah, really good. I really loved this episode. And given that it was the finale, I just thought it delivered on so much. It gave everyone a wrap up. It covered off parts of the story. It's opened up so much more that we're going to see in season 2, which we know is being shot at the moment. So I really like this. And to be honest, that unexpected ending where it almost seemed a little Happy Families from Homelander, and certainly given that was coming off what the hell moment from Billy Butcher, and a longing, deathly gaze from Homelander into Madalyn Stillwell's eyes, I thought was really good. I liked, I just thought this was a really strong final episode, and it delivered on so much from the season, from the last few episodes and for this final episode. So, absolutely 5 rapey Santas out of 5.
Excellent. Yeah, I really enjoyed it overall. The season in itself has been a real revelation of a TV show. I do think it goes so fast in these 8 episodes, and they focus on just the 7 and just the boys so much that a lot of the background detail about Vought International and Vought Industries we don't know. So I hope they explore that a little bit more next season, so we see a little bit more of the universe that all these characters are in. But it's been fascinating and really, really good as a season overall. Chris?
Yeah, I can't say much more than it's already been said. I've loved the source material for years. I've loved this show. I've loved, as I talked about, when I thought they were going to zig, they zagged instead. And it was definitely, I thought coming into this, I may be at a point where I knew everything they were going to do. That's not the case with this.
Absolutely.
This has been fantastic. And this last scene says it all for me. This literally, I have no idea where they're going to go with this. And I couldn't be more excited. So I can't wait till next year until the boys are back.
Excellent. Well, Chris, I know you've given us an extra special episode of Chris's Corner, so we'll let you rest your voice. We're going to go on and do some feedback in our feedback section called Frenchie's Letters. Okay, that was a lie. Chris is actually in Tokyo at the moment. We have taken a little respite, taken a little break after we recorded our podcast about the finale of The Boys, and now we're into The Boys, Frenchie's Letters for the finale.
Yes, it's Frenchie's finale letters.
Yes, much better. Our first piece of feedback comes from Ray over on our email at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. Ray says, "Hi guys, just finished the last 2 episodes of The Boys and wanted to write in to let you know some of my thoughts of the finale of what has been a superb TV show. I'll get straight to it. The final showdown between Stillwell, Butcher and Homelander was absolutely compelling. Having seen previously the intimacy shared between Stillwell and Homelander, but bearing in mind the utter psychotic nature of him, brilliantly portrayed by Anthony Starr, let me say, I looked him up and had no idea he was a Kiwi."
Interesting stuff.
Yeah. I didn't know he was a New Zealander either.
Yeah, I think Anthony Starr has been phenomenal, actually. And I do not use that word lightly. I think he portrayed just the creepiness, the craziness, the weirdness, and then the Supermanness and that public persona.
Yeah.
The duplicity there is just so well done.
And there's even moments in this episode how hurt he is at the idea that Stillwell would be so terrified of him and would hide these things from him, you know? There's some great moments in this episode as well, just along with all the other stuff he's done this season. Absolute standout. Ray goes on to say, I was iffy at how the whole situation would play out, and the death of Stillwell packed a mighty punch. Actually, the thought of her poor baby when Butcher blew the whole place up also shocked me, to be honest. Yeah, it was one of those ones where you go, did that baby die? As we talked about in the podcast, you know, and yeah, we think it has. We'll probably see in season 2 whether they'll renege on that, whether they'll go, oh, actually, the baby was superpowered, it's still alive, or, you know, maybe Homelander's not that bad, he did save the baby. Maybe the bomb didn't even explode, you know, there is that moment where it just goes to light as Butcher presses the button. Maybe it was stopped before the explosion happened. You never know. There are ways out of it that they can go for in season 2. Ray says, there hasn't been a show like this in a long time. It's so well written, large ensemble cast. I still love season 1 of Daredevil, but even that has different beats to its 13 episodes compared to The Boys. Homelander is one of the best realized villains adapted for screen from the comics. Oh, and by the way, I am definitely going to have to read the comics now for sure. And the fact that the boys are all human gives them a fragility and vulnerability as opposed to their superpowered nemesis. I think we talked about on the podcast this idea that the boys could possibly take V to go up against the superhumans. And I think that part of the reason why the boys works as a show is that it is humans using everything available to them to blow up and kill superhumans, but not kind of facing them toe to toe in a way. They're kind of using, you know, bombs and guns to take out the superhumans. And I think that's quite cool.
Absolutely. I think the whole thing is inverted. It plays with your thoughts and ideas of the superhero genre. Mm-hmm. But what I mean by that is it's inverted in the sense that the heroes are regular people, and it's inverted in the sense that the superheroes, who should be good, are much darker, if not downright evil. So it just inverts the whole thing. Although it does keep corporate evil at a pretty standard sort of level setting. Really.
Yeah. They're the human evil, I suppose, if you want to say that. And it is interesting that, and those humans that you identify with as being heroes, some of them are a-holes as well. You know, at the end of the day, we do have that conversation between Homelander and Butcher in this episode where Homelander goes to him, hang on a second, are you telling me you have absolutely no proof that I killed your wife? Surely you have some hard and fast proof here that I killed your wife. You didn't just go in this mission on the assumption of something that happened. Yeah? And Butcher's like, not really. You know, it's like you have nothing here at all. But yeah, really interesting. I love the dynamic between these two sides. Back to Ray. He says, one thought about A-Train. I really do like how he finally admits to Hughie that he killed Popclaw. The inner turmoil was so well played by Jesse T. Usher. You know what? It's something that we didn't really talk about was the actors behind these characters. You know, as Chris said, he hated A-Train from the beginning because of the storyline that was being portrayed. Yeah. But absolutely, Jesse T. Usher is great. The whole cast really... There's not really a bad person among them.
No, they've all been really, really good. And I think you're right. I think his descent from being this poster boy to, in his own way, being sidelined. I mean, it's very different from what happens with the Deep.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's also pretty similar in that, you know, he loses it. So does the Deep. There's all these, the only even keel really is Black Noir, because we don't really know an awful lot about him. And probably Homelander to some extent. But even that, he has the rage. Even Queen Maeve does. And I think they've all really played their parts so well in showing these small journeys for the personal character as much as the wider storyline. And I agree. I think Jesse T. Usher was really good as A-Train. And that conflict around Popclaw about killing Hughie's girlfriend Robin, but also then Hughie being involved with all this surveillance and potentially Popclaw, you know, in A-Train's mind. But yeah, the conflict is there. It's not Hughie, it's him. But he forced him to do it. So it's just, the confusion, the deceit to himself really comes out.
Exactly. Ray continues, the Deep. What the hell is going on with him? The shaving scene with Oriam in the background again left me conflicted. It is still comical, but you can't help but feel for the Deep in his own little journey. I hope we get more of him in next season. Love the Deep this season, and love to see more of the character next season. And And I hope it's not going to become just that comedy clip of every time he tries to save a sea creature, it dies in front of him, but that would still be worth it. I just want to see the actor back, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Chase Crawford played him so well, for sure. And, I mean, I think it would be really interesting to see him actually do that 180. Maybe this is one of the Vought superheroes, that one of the 7 that can change or will look to change. It's interesting to know because, in some respects, maybe you'll just revert back to type. You know, Stillwell is dead and he's still alive. So maybe he just comes back into the fold and then has learnt nothing and gets an even harsher treatment of him when he's trying to, whip off his well, I was going to say his knickers, but his
swimming togs.
His swim togs, effectively.
Maybe. Ray continues, I loved Black Noir playing Chopin on the grand piano. He's deliciously mysterious, which I guess is the point, but I just want to know more about him, and I hope we get that too. Such a good show, and always grand hearing you guys break it down as well as you do, and tie things into the comics like Chris did. Thanks very much for that, Chris. Look forward to hearing your thoughts on the show, and here's to another season of The Boys up ahead. Thanks so much, Ray. Always great to hear from you. I think my episode of Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast, where I'm interviewed by Ray about loads of stuff, awesome comic stuff, I think that's coming up later on this month, so make sure you check that out over on his podcast. Thanks, Ray.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ray. Yeah, over on Facebook, Salim Kisler goes, what a fantastic show. Can't wait to see what Billy does next. At DragonCon, Urban and Quaid said Season 2 is even crazier than Season 1. Pretty standard line, but I believe them.
I do too.
yeah, I do as well. And I did ask Salim, was it a pretty sweary panel? And he said, oh yes. So I reckon if there was the Luke Cage swear jar, then for sure that would be pretty full with cash.
Absolutely, yeah. Robert Phillip begins, no! Homelander really is a supervillain without redeeming features. Best 7 moment, the arrival of Starlight, to save the day. Best boys moment, the punch from Mother's Milk, is everything we've come to expect. And best other moment, the melting of Madalyn via her optic nerves. I love that moment when Mother's Milk punches Hughie in the face to get the retainer out of his mouth, because it looks like he's going to do something different, because Frenchie's been trying for ages to pull it out of his mouth. Mother's Milk is like, just give me a second, everything will be okay.
Absolutely. No, really good stuff.
Yeah.
And yes, Homelander does not have any redeeming quality. I really do wonder how Super Kid is going to turn out, because, his laser eyes do light up on knowing that Homelander is his father, and I'm kind of there going, is he just going to teach him to be an absolute nightmare?
Possibly.
I suspect so.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bob. Also, over on Facebook, we have Sylvie Carbonneau. She says, just finished watching episode 8. Wow, what a way to end the first season. I was expecting Homelander to sacrifice Stillwell, but his way to kill her was even more cruel and heinous than I expected. Billy choosing revenge brings him on a terrible and painful path, while Hughie choosing to save the other boys ends up in a better situation. But is he really? The super terrorists are still out there, meaning that the Supes will still be part of the military and even more powerful and glorified. The boys are still wanted, and Homelander is more powerful than ever now that his only weakness is dead. Season 2 will be a hell of a ride. Absolutely, Sylvie, for sure. Yeah, and he may have an ally in his little kid who goes shooting little laser beams from his eyes.
Maybe.
I think,
remember, Butcher also has that baby that he was able to shoot lasers out of his eyes.
Yeah, that'd be quite cool. And I think that moment where Hughie chooses to save the other boys, Billy chooses revenge, I think it's a really nice moment here.
Yeah.
And yes, that cruel way from Homelander. I mean, whether Stillwell actually deserved it is another matter entirely, arguably. But I think, there is that moment where he knows that she's afraid of him, but he forces her to tell him, and then laser eyes into the eye, that loving death glance that he gives, and yeah.
After threatening her child right in front of her as well, you know, it's such a brutal moment. As you say, such a heinous moment from Homelander to do that right in front of her, and after saying to her, "Oh, finally you're telling the truth. You're scared of me. I kind of knew, but I needed you to say it out loud," and then blowing at the back of her head with the laser eyes. Yeah, crazy stuff. Thanks so much for all the Facebook feedback.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the feedback. Really, really good.
Make sure you join the Facebook group. It is where we will be announcing the other stuff that we're going to be talking about after these shows are all finished up. This is obviously the last episode of The Boys. We will be talking about loads of other stuff coming up. I can confirm, since we recorded the podcast, that we will definitely be talking about Watchmen, the upcoming show from HBO, another show about crazy superheroes in the modern world. What it'd be like to have them around. Yeah,
definitely. I'm really looking forward to just seeing how that compares to The Boys, but I think also just judging it in its own right, because The Boys comes from what Watchmen did in many respects, and it'll be interesting to see the different takes.
Absolutely, because Watchmen is going to be a much more political show. We definitely know that, but it's not based on the books. It's a kind of a sequel to the books. It's coming out on the 20th of October in the US, and it's been confirmed for the 21st of October. So it's going to be a simulcast on Sky Atlantic in Europe. So they will be actually broadcasting it the same day pretty much as it's coming out in the US, which shows a lot of confidence. I always say this, when a show is bought from America and is shown the same day, it's kind of at that level of a Game of Thrones. It's kind of one of those big shows that Sky Atlantic really believe in if they're going to show it the same day.
Yes, and shock horror, everyone. Alan Moore still isn't involved.
No, he's not. Alan Moore actually retired this year, officially. Dave Gibbons is involved in this production, though.
No, he might be. Cool. But Alan Moore, as usual,
is not involved
in any of his pieces of work translated to the big or small screen.
Well, absolutely. He did the definitive version as a comic book. It's out there. If you want to read it, read that.
I love him.
Absolutely. If you don't like the translation, his book's still there, as he says himself. So,
love him. Big, bushy beard.
Absolutely. Let's go on to some voicemail to close out our feedback section for this final episode of The Boys. The first voicemail comes in from Callista, who's a long-time listener but has never actually sent us in a voicemail before. Thanks so much, Callista. Here's her thoughts.
Yeah, hi, Callista.
All right, so thinking about the first and the last scene, they are both centered around Homelander, and the first scene, he comes out with that condescending line that they've said multiple times, "You are the real heroes," and then proceeds to destroy everyone in his path and slowly crunch a man's head beneath his feet and just smile. And then the last scene is him kneeling in front of his son and saying, "We're a family." And it's just so creepy. You know, most of the time when you hear "we're a family," then you think, oh, that's nice. But with him, it's just, oh, what is this going to look like? And how could he possibly fit into their lives? And holy shit, did that kid's eyes just glow red for a second? And is this a new experiment? What's his face? The doctor was saying that with his dogs, if they don't have moms, they're angry and violent. So is this kid with Becca as an experiment to see if he has all the same powers as Homelander, but isn't an actual psychopath? So that was just fascinating. And I made a few notes. Basically, one of the things that really stood out was all of the different heroes' pain or how they're doing. How the Deep is just standing in front of the mirror calling himself an idiot and cutting off all his hair. I mean, that was just so painful. And A-Train is clearly reaching the end of his addiction. But that's funny about Black Noir. He's just still chilling, sitting down at the piano. It's beautiful music. He's obviously an amazing player. And then Starlight, she does the right thing at the end, or what we perceive as the right thing, by helping Hughie and the boys. But the funniest part ever is when they're trying to save Kimiko and Frenchie is telling Hughie to back up MM, and he's just like, you just pull the fucking trigger right now. And he was like, okay. And he starts shooting. I'm sorry. And then he like bends down. He's like, I'm out. Oh, it was so funny. Just murdering people and not saying that he's sorry the entire time. Which is why I was really confused about why in the world did they not kill A-Train? They've had 2 different chances now. The first time when Kimiko broke open his leg in Hughie's house, and the second time when they're in, that space where he has a heart attack. And what is the deal with that? It's not like they haven't killed people. It's not that they haven't killed super people. So why are they not killing A-Train? And the only thing I can think of is maybe it's a plot device. If I've never read the comics, but does at some point A-Train switch over to the side of the boys because they have had a chance to kill him twice and just haven't? And I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. Okay. My favorite quote was when they're all in Madalyn's house and it's dark and she's strapped with all those bombs. And at this point, the baby's crying too, I think. Maybe not. And Homelander's saying, so what's your plan here? And then Homelander says, you are dark and I kind of like it. And I just laughed because I thought, true, that is true, Homelander. And also, that is exactly how I feel about this show. It is dark, and I kind of like it. And the last thing was, wow. Madalyn's skull. Can you guys, I mean, holy, I've never seen anything like this. He stares into her eyes, and her face just slowly melts away, but not enough that we can't see the outline of her skull. I have never seen anything like this. It was so beautiful in a really horrifying kind of way. And that's all, except that I want to say that you guys are incredible. I'm so grateful that you're covering this show because you're just so wonderful to listen to, and can't wait till next season.
Thank you so much, Callista, for that. Really good. You know, I like notes too. Notes are good.
Notes are king, yes, absolutely.
We're pretty happy you had notes there. Yeah,
we were laughing the whole way through. I loved your reaction to the beautiful, horrifying skull of Madalyn.
Yeah,
I absolutely reacted.
Absolutely,
that way.
That's not a first date you want to go on to, where someone looks into your eyes and melts your skull.
Definitely.
And I agree with you. I think there is something dark about the boys, but I like it too. And I think you're right. There's a really dark sense of humor, which is good. And just so funny, but at the same time, you know, there's some really good serious stuff here as well. I think, you know, I think the A-Train thing, you know, why is he still alive? I think we get a hint of that from Hughie when effectively Kimiko does break his legs, and I think Hughie realizes, I think it's like him going to save Frenchie and Mother's Milk, realizes that it's not going to bring Robin back. There is that slow realization from him that he could kill as many superheroes as he wants to, and he will effectively still have lost Robin and potentially is in love with a superhero in Starlight. And I think he realizes that, you know, he's not Billy Butcher ultimately.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and I think that's really good. I think the other thing, that whole line, you are dark, and I kind of like it, from Homelander when he speaks to Billy Butcher. It's almost like it's a kindred spirit, isn't it?
A little bit of admiration.
A little bit of admiration. Yeah. And I think, there's a bit of each of them in one another, so to speak.
It's kind of the thing of Homelander is really dark, but nobody allows him to go to the lengths that Billy Butcher goes to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of that way. I totally agree with what Callista's saying there. It is really interesting as well. I think Hughie didn't intentionally kill any of the guards. I think he was told to lay down suppressing fire, and any ones that he did hit with the gun.
Hit one,
any ones that he did hit, he was kind of going, I'm sorry, I didn't intend to. I just want you guys to sit down while Mother's Milk does his thing, and Frenchie can't shoot a gun right now. So I'm sorry. So I don't think I don't think he would have been able to muster up enough courage to kill A-Train at that point, because he's kind of turned that corner now.
Definitely. And I really enjoyed your point around Homelander, Callista, actually saying, where he's kneeling in front of his son.
Oh, yeah.
We're a family. The kid's eyes creepily light up.
Mm-hmm.
And it is. I think I had the same kind of idea. I was like, well, what is this moment? Is this the redemption of Homelander? Mm-hmm. The fact that he has taken out Stillwell, he's taken out his laboratory father, effectively, or we guess he has anyway.
Yeah, he squeezed the information out of him. That's how he described
exactly.
it. So, I kind of feel like a tube of tomato ketchup. He squeezed the information out of him. Yeah.
It's like, is this the redemption of him, or is this like, as you say, he's now, I can have an army of my minions effectively to help, or this will be a great cover act for me, or does he want to be a father? It's as you say, what is this thing going to look like? What will it work?
Yeah.
Is it an experiment from Vought International that you have someone of Homelander being brought up just by a mother rather than in a laboratory? Is it that they're going to hate one another ultimately?
Maybe.
How will this work? What's it going to look like? I had exactly those same ideas because it was that unexpected ending for me.
Absolutely. And it's even that line of we are a family, as Billy Butcher is there, Becca's there, the kid's there, and Homelander's there. Does he mean all four of them are now a family unit to take care of this kid? Is this turning a corner for him as well? Really interesting stuff. And loved that line, as you said, John, actually. I love your description of the kid's eyes lighting up as he sees his father. It's not just lighting up as a kid's eyes would, it's lighting up full of powerful lasers.
Exactly,
I really love that. Excellent feedback. Thank you so much for that, Callista. Hopefully we'll see you back for season 2 of The Boys. Hopefully you'll even join us for Watchmen over on HBO. A lot more serious, we expect it to be, especially from the creators that are there, but it's another twist on the superhero genre that we hope you enjoy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Callista.
Yeah, and
really
send us some more feedback in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did also love that sad moment of the Deep calling himself an idiot as he shaves his head in the Britney Spears way as well. So it was a sad moment, as everybody's mentioned too. So definitely know what you mean about that. But some really good stuff in this final episode. Thanks so much. We'll close out our feedback on this final episode with voicemail feedback from Steve Brown.
Okay, guys, this is Steve, and this is for episode 8, the season finale of The Boys. And what did Billy shoot Annie with, or did she have a bulletproof vest on, or is she bullet resistant? At the end there, we didn't see any blood. We just saw kind of black marks at the end of the last episode, and then this episode is not even addressed, except that she had to convince them that she wasn't part of the Boys, I guess. Absolutely love seeing Jim Beaver in this episode. He is a regular on the show Supernatural, which was also created or Eric Kripke had a big part of, and still does, I think, to some extent, maybe not as much now, but as the seasons, as that show's coming to a close. But his character had the same name as his character on Supernatural, Robert Singer, so I really like that. As a 7 moment, I'm going to say Annie confronting her mother, because she's technically still part of the 7, even though she, by the end of this episode, seems to be turning more toward us. And for my boys moment, I absolutely love that Frenchie talks about the futile gesture that Hughie is making, trying to rescue them. And but once again, we see that Hughie just has this kind of innate or instinctual kind of way that things just work out. I don't know, maybe that's his superpower. He has a luck or something like that. And of course, the big reveal at the end is huge, that Billy's wife is alive and that her son with Homelander is alive. But really, really kind of a dark ending, really, with Homelander killing Madalyn, and then I think we can only assume that the baby died in the explosion, unless he was able to save both Billy and the baby. So can't wait till next season. Can't wait to see what you guys do next. Talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. Yeah, she's alive. She's alive. Yes, that was a pretty big ending, actually, to see that Billy Butcher's wife still alive. Yeah. Although I think I was starting to think that was definitely one of the options on the table.
I loved how shocked Chris was because Becca's dead in the comics.
Yes, exactly.
You know? I love that Chris was kind of going, I definitely didn't expect that, because he kind of thought there's certain things, if you read the comics, that are completely off the table, and that was one of them. So,
definitely. Yeah. And I think that was, kind of one of the things for this season. I hadn't seen the comics at all. And so all of a sudden it was, well, this is an absolute possibility that she is still alive. I think what was most surprising was, to what extent do we believe Homelander that actually maybe he really did like her? I know he was trying to certainly rile Billy Butcher up, but is that why she left him sat on the seat? Is it just because of the act that she did, or did she have some form of feelings for Homelander? Is her remorse there? Is her kind of, deep in thought, is that to do with Homelander because she's going to have to leave him? Or is it because she's leaving Billy Butcher? Yeah. Like, what I mean is, we've only really seen her and Billy Butcher's previous life very much in flashback, and it's coming from his perspective.
Yeah. I have left my original opinion in the podcast that I think it was rape from Homelander. At the time, I totally believe that, and now, as we've been talking about it, and the more we've watched it, and the more time has passed, I am wondering if they wanted to keep it as an open question for season 2. Now that Becca's appeared just at the end of the season 1, so I kind of now I'm rethinking my idea, and I'm wondering if they're going to play with that a little bit in season 2.
That was really interesting, and definitely I think. Frenchie's, just his whole "I love your futile gesture" to Hughie was such a great bit of dialogue. Really, really nice. Yeah. And Annie's confrontation with her mother. I mean, what an awkward conversation. It's like, oh, so is that why father left? Is that why dad left? Yeah. I just thought that was really nicely done. Just how Annie, now armed with this new information, confronts her mum and begins to put certain pieces together about her own childhood and what happened between her and her mum, and between her mum and her dad, about, effectively saying, I can't actually deal with the fact that we have changed our daughter into a superhero. Yeah. And maybe it was because they didn't actually get anything for that. Maybe. That it was, oh, hang on, we only got the hospital bills, which I suppose are big in the US, but it's kind of
massive.
Maybe a bit more for after.
I think it's partially to do with her father kind of going, oh, we've now bought into this life with no support, and now we have to force our child down this path that he may not have believed in. I wonder if we will see him in season 2 as she explores her background and maybe finds out the story as to why her father left. Remember,
I wonder if her dad
she's going to have to have a story.
Alive.
Yeah, she's going to have a story in season 2. So I wonder if there's part of that. And maybe he's not even alive. As for what she was shot with at the end of the last episode, I don't know, I just kind of feel like Billy Butcher killing her in the park in front of Hughie was never in the plan. I feel like even though Billy Butcher talks this big game about hating all Supes, I think he still wants to keep Hughie on side and didn't want to actually do anything to hurt her. So maybe he was just using some kind of salt bullets. What are they called?
Yeah, salt rock, like James Bond does in View to a Kill, where he's like, it's the shotgun cartridges, but filled with salt crystals.
Yeah, something like that, where it's just knocking her out. Or, of course, the other option is that all Supes, all of these big characters in the 7, they've gotten there because they can't be killed by regular bullets. They just haven't really said it on the show. Do you know what I mean? Because remember, they didn't use a gun on A-Train. They used the sledgehammer to break his leg. They didn't do anything. They haven't used guns on any of the superheroes, as far as I remember, at this stage. Maybe they all have protective powers that don't allow them to be killed.
Maybe
that way. So maybe that's what the V does, because they've all been created the same way. Remember, so maybe they all have that superpower that guns don't hurt them. So just knock them back a little bit. But that's an interesting one that they didn't even come back to it to say why it was that, you know?
Yeah, and of course, who doesn't like Jim Beaver
awesome.
From Supernatural?
Yeah,
great
awesome.
stuff. Great to see him there. A nice spot about him having the same name here, Robert Singer, as he does in Supernatural. Yes, really good to see him. I love it when they just pop in like that and do a little cameo.
It's just one of those ones where a show's gone on that long and you know that they obviously have some affection for each other when they go in and star on each other's shows and do little cameos here and there.
Definitely.
You know? Maybe we'll see the brothers in the next season of
that would be
of the show.
Amazing.
Yeah, it'd be really good, wouldn't it?
Okay, yes. We all like the Beaver, but we also do love the Supernatural boys. Great crossover idea. You should go into TV, Derek.
I'm telling you, if I could do it. You know, the show's finishing up pretty soon. They do need another role. Maybe they can star as
Be brilliant.
characters in the show.
Love
Maybe
those two guys.
Yeah, maybe we'll get them over.
Even when the show got a little ropey, you've still gotta love the Winchesters.
Mm-hmm. And Castiel, don't forget Castiel. Yes, looking forward. I always love Castiel. He's always great. That show is finishing up. Maybe they will get parts in season 2 of The Boys as superheroes themselves, or more hunters of superheroes this time over on the show. That'd be kind of cool. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for your voicemail, Steve Brown. Really good to see voicemails from you throughout this season. You now should know what we're going to be covering in future on TV podcast industries. Make sure you all stay subscribed to the other shows that we'll be doing. Gonna hand you back over to us from the past, including Chris, to say goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us all the way throughout The Boys Season 1. We will be back with The Boys podcast next year when it comes out on Amazon Prime. Hopefully they'll have learned from Disney Plus and be releasing episodes weekly, the way we've been releasing our podcast episodes weekly, because I love talking about podcasts every week. It's always been great fun chatting about our TV shows. Chris, thank you so much for joining us and making the time for every episode of this season of The Boys. It's been really, really good to have your expertise of The Boys on board, because neither myself and John have read all of the comics. I've read a few, and I know, John, you've read a little
I've
bit.
only really just touched the bloody iceberg on The Boys. Yeah.
Excellent. So thanks very much for being on board for all of the episodes this season. It's been really good.
Oh, always going to be here for you guys for this.
Excellent. Thank you very much to all of our boys and girls for joining us. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on TV Podcast Industries. As we mentioned, we're still doing Pennyworth every Monday with new episodes each week until that season finishes with episode 10. And we'll have loads more stuff coming up later on in the year.
Yes, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for having me here, for listening to my rambling thoughts on the difference between comic books and the TV show and Chris's Corner. And thank you just so much for joining us. Can't wait to see you again for The Boys next year. Mm-hmm. And stay tuned for everything that will be non-Pennyworth stuff.
Loads of other stuff as well. Yes.
Yeah, loads of stuff coming down the tracks.
Oh, and of course, make sure you join us over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries. It's usually the first place we mention whatever we're going to be covering in the future. There's so much stuff coming up this year, and we're not exactly sure what the future stuff we're covering towards the end of the year is. So make sure you follow us over there, and you'll get some news about that pretty soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, boys and girls, for joining us. It is a pleasure speaking with you. We have to cut and run for our lives. But come on, fellow boys and girls, get ready for season 2. Chop, chop. Bye.
I didn't save too many outtakes from this season of The Boys, but here's a few that I thought were really funny. They are overweighted to John for some reason, not necessarily because he messes up more often than the rest of us, but they're the ones I've kept anyway. Hope you enjoy, and we'll talk to you again next time.
But Homelander arrives to investigate Frenchie's van, and as they cause an explosion to distract Homelander, another explosion rips through Translucent's colon. As Hughie...
Oh, dear.
But Homelander arrives... Sorry. Oh dear, this will be the longest synopsis ever. them going to a Spice Girls conference. Jesus.
Just off to the Spice Girls conference.
Where Posh Spice gives a presentation and slide set on losing weight.
And how to spice up your life. 10 easy steps.
Dear me. Right, let's slap that out of me. And I really like the conversation that they have where, they're talking about going to a Spice Girls oh my God. Where they're going to a Spice Girls concert. I think as well, for me, it just ties into the talk earlier in the episode between him and Mother's Milk about, are you monogamous or polygamous? Polygamous?
Are you monogamous or not?
Yeah. It's as Billy said, if what was the frozen girl called?
Ice Princess.
Ice cream.
Sorry, ice cream.
Ice cream.
Ice Queen.
Oh, ice cream.
Ice cream.
Cornetto.
As Billy said. As Billy said.
I think as Billy said, and presumably someone somewhere in Boston got a baseball head. Sorry, baseball head. Yes, I have a note. It was more of a question note. Is John Doman, the great John Doman, who was in the choir?
Preaching to the choir, John. I love it.
In The Wire, that should have been.
So let's jump into it. At this point, we're going to each... Sorry.
Okay. No, you're fine.
I'm really out of form today.
You're out of what?
Out of form.
I thought you said horn.
I'm also out of that.
Out of
Luckily, the internet is there.
Yes, I'm out of powdered rhino horn. Black rhino.
Oh, I thought you said porn. That's why I was like, internet is porn for me. It's
porn.
fine. Wow, what an episode, boys, and I'm really dying to get into it.
Well, unless the Deep, who have absolutely nothing else to do. Or A-Train, who can, send about 6,000 tweets every 5 seconds,
Well, he'll probably destroy his phone. Lag.
He probably would.
It's all about that log. Okay,
oh,
so
Chris,
speaking...
Chris,
Yep.
I think you said it's all about that log instead of lag.
It's all about that lag. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's all about that lag, man.
He only has about 5 writers' credits in the past, and not that many. He only has about 10? 10? What did I double
5, 10, 15, 20.
Chris, John, do you want to kick us off with your protagonist moment? Damn it, I didn't know you'd moved it around. Sorry.
It makes more sense.
Stephen. Yeah, Stephen. Stephen? Certainly Mother's Milk has been sort of dismissive of Frenchie's relationship with the female, with Kimiko, and with Kimiko, and
Kimiko.
And then she makes effectively her final mistake by giving a different story than Vogelbaum.
Vogelbaum.
That's not his name. Jesus. Yes.
Stop being a rapey butcher and get down off the roof. I love it.
Exactly. A rapey Santa, in fact, and not a rapey butcher.
Alright, sorry. Stop being...
What's happened to Chris?
He's stretching.
Oh, well.